On-the-scene coverage of ACC 2015 is supported by Effient.
I'm Peter Block here in San Diego at ACC 2015 for On the Scene. Standing next to me is Paul Sarajan, now from Minneapolis, recently, just 2 years ago, moved from Mayo. Paul, welcome. Paul has been involved with the review of the commercial use of transcatheter mitral valve clipping, the MitraClip. So Paul, tell me what you reviewed. Tell me a little bit about the data that you have. Sure. 600 some odd patients, is that correct?
That's right. So we looked at the first group of patients who underwent commercial transcatheter mitral valve repair with MitraClip in the United States. And we looked at patients who had participated in therapy and were enrolled through August 31st, and there were 564 patients who were treated.
Okay, so you have a fairly large number of patients. Tell me about how they were split up, functional, degenerative, mitral regurgitation, and then tell me about what you learned.
So the predominant pathology was degenerative mitral regurgitation, which is consistent with the labeled indication for MitraClip. That was in 86% of the patients. Another 5% were labeled as both DMR and functional, and then about 9% had functional only.
So that really is pretty much as FDA requires.
That's correct. And sorry.
Go ahead.
So the patients were a median age of 83. And the STS-PROM score for repair was 7.9, and for replacement was 10. So consistent with the prohibitive risk population. Okay,
so these are fairly high-risk patients. I guess the answer is, how well did they do? I mean, that's the next obvious question, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, so they did really well. So with MitraClip, a clip was implanted 94% of the time. Success rate was 92%, and patients left the hospital directly to home 82% of the time.
Okay, so the big question that always comes up with MitraClip is, what was the reduction in MR?
So after clip implantation, 93% had MR grade 2 or less, 64% had grade 1 or less.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a hard question. Sure. Is reduction to 2 or less enough to make a patient better?
I think that's a great question, and certainly surgery is more efficacious and certainly has the track record of being very safe. We know that residual MR or even in asymptomatic patients can have prognostic implications. I think the jury is still out for residual MR in MitraClip. Certainly some of the studies that have small numbers of patients with short follow-up say there's no difference in terms of symptom survival, but we still need to follow these patients longer.
Yeah, there's no question about it. We've been involved with this at Emory as well, and we find that patients feel better and they seem to do better. The question is how long that'll last, but some of the Everest data now show that it goes out for 3 or 4 years.
That's correct. In that 4-year follow-up, the outcome was the same despite differences in MR reduction between surgery and MitraClip. But I think we still have to wait and see how they do in the long term.
So that's a review of where MitraClip stands as far as the commercial use is concerned. High-risk patients, mostly truly degenerative mitral regurgitation. How the COAP trial will interact with all this will be very interesting, because now we'll be looking at functional mitral regurgitation rather than degenerative. But nevertheless, very promising results. Thank you very much, Paul, for being here.
Thank you for having me.